Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
All right, good. So, ordinarily this takes me about an hour and a half, but I had a long conversation with Chris, and we want to go about 40 minutes because I know you have a lot of questions, and it's such a beautiful night. We're not going to keep you late. So I'm going to move relatively quickly, but I've skimmed it down. Everything you're going to see today is really about three things: critical race theory, the racialization of our classrooms, social emotional learning, which is neither social nor emotional.
Right.
We'll see. And then, of course, then there's the sexuality. What I'm going to do is get through the first two parts: social emotional learning and the critical race theory. Then I'm going to pause and I'm going to ask you, before I begin the sex stuff, how much of it do you want to see? Because it's really graphic. I'll tell you where my position about this is. About 2 years ago, I was a keynote speaker at the Republican convention at the Dells a couple of years ago. I was going to speak about what's going on in the public schools. I was invited by the Republican Party to speak. I was one of the keynote speakers. And 2 minutes, literally, before I had to go on stage, I was told by somebody, "Oh, but you can't show your slides, Dr. Pesta. They're too graphic." So I learned this 2 minutes before. And I asked the Republican Party, well, if our 11-year-old children are watching this, you're telling me I can't show it to the only people in the state who could vote it out. And they said, that's right, you're not going to show it. So at that point, I made a resolution. And that resolution is if I'm invited to speak about this stuff, if you want to hear it, I will show you. It's not really fit for children. If you've got kids under the age of maybe 16 or 17, I'm not sure that's a good thing to keep them. But given the time we're up against here, I can talk about it without showing you this. I'll let you decide, right? But that'll be at the last part of the talk. I'll take a second, and anybody who's got younger children here, I'll give you a chance to leave if you wish to, and we can decide how much you want to see. It's hard to watch. Again, I repeat, there's no way I can convince you how bad it is if you don't see it. Words do not do it justice. I know some of you have seen this talk at other places. Chris, you know about this stuff, right? It's bad. It's really bad. And so when we get there, we'll stop and reassess. So let's start with what's going on with the bigger picture. So social emotional learning. I am stunned by the degree that people, conservative school board people, have Republican Party members who, when they hear the words social emotional learning, their first response is, oh, wonderful. We want our kids to be sociologically taken care of. We want our kids to be emotionally cared for in public schools. Are you kidding me?
No.
I mean, first of all, our public school teachers, and I'm a teacher myself, so this is not just randomly hating on teachers, but our public school teachers were hired to do #one job. And that job was to teach our kids to read, to write, do math. And you've seen the scores. Everywhere across the country and all across Wisconsin, achievement levels are plummeting. To give you an example, 25 years ago, Wisconsin was in the 85th percentile for kids being able to do math and read at grade level. You know what the number is right now? 34%.
Yeah.
More than half. Do you know what the number is in Milwaukee?
No, less than that.
6%. How much money, how much effort, how much control of schools in this state have been handed over money to make equity for Milwaukee kids? The progressives have been in charge of education since World War II. And everything they do to change education has made it less educative, and it has made minority kids farther behind. That's going to be my opening statement. This is not a systemically racist country. Critical race theory, no matter how they try to explain it to you, it's not equity, it's not equality, it's not teaching black history. Critical race theory is teaching your children that America is systemically racist from the bone. Every law, every document, every state constitution is nothing but racism. That's what they're teaching your kids. And it's obviously not true. If this is a systemically white supremacist country, then we're really bad at it because this is the most diverse country in the history of the world. Right? It's not even close. And we're really bad at being racist because over the last 50 years, 85% of our immigrants, legal and illegal, are not white. And it's really bad trolling if you're systematically trying to destroy people who look different. And this has always been the case, by the way. I'm not suggesting that idiots don't exist. I'm not suggesting that there aren't bigots in the world. But when your kids are being told, if your kids are white, your grandkids are white, they're oppressors.
Yeah.
And if they're minorities, they're victims. I think that's even more insulting. They call your white children oppressors, white privilege, white supremacists, simply for being there. Meanwhile, anybody who's not white, it could be the children of LeBron James or Barack Obama. They're victims of those white kids sitting next to them. It's outrageous. It is segregation and racism masquerading as education. Whether you're talking about the 1619 program, which hundreds of historian professors of history have said, it's garbage history. It's just all made up. It's lies. Whether it's that or the books that these kids are reading, it's pretty stunning. Well, think about this. Just last year, over 120 universities had segregated graduations for LGBTQ kids, for African American kids, Native American kids. You remember this. If this is a systemically racist country, think about this for a second. The last holdover of slavery that lingered into the 20th century was segregation. Segregation, we all realize, is racism. That was eradicated with the civil rights movement. Here today, your progressive educators, the ones that control your public schools, they are bringing segregation back and calling it fighting racism. There are universities across the country that are building dorms just for black kids or just for LGBTQ kids. Because, look, if you're going to spend 18 years of public school telling children that white people are evil, you can't ask minorities then to share bedrooms or halls in dorms with white people. You can't do it. The entire program of critical race theory is designed to resegregate, to re-racialize. You remember, it's cliche to point out that Martin Luther King said, we long for a world where we are judged by the color, not the color of our skin, but the character, right? Our characters. And this critical race theory is exactly the opposite. All that matters is race. You are only defined by your race. When you look at a group of students at the University of Wisconsin on Oshkosh, when my colleagues look at a group of kids, 18-year-old kids, and they say, white kids have privilege, black kids are victims, you are engaging in racism. The only qualification, the only thing that you are looking at is skin color. This is what I mean, and this will be clear in a couple minutes. The only systemic racism in this country can be found in the progressive left. And the only place you're going to find it is the public schools. So let's let that sink in. The people calling everybody else racists are the ones who are segregating, the ones who are discriminating, the ones who are using only skin color to determine worth, value, or victimhood. Take a look, for instance, one of my favorite, I think he's the greatest economist in the world right now, Thomas Sowell, Stanford University, grew up in Harlem, was homeless as a little boy, had to work his way into school, paid everything working odd jobs, took advantage in the 1950s of those opportunities people of all different colors had to become, again, the preeminent economist in the world today. He said this as early as 2004. Ours may become the first civilization destroyed, not by the power of our enemies, but by the ignorance of our teachers and the dangerous nonsense they are teaching our children. In an age of artificial intelligence, they are creating artificial stupidity. If teachers are telling our kids that biological sex, male and female, doesn't exist, but 176 made-up genders between man and woman, you better believe those as if they were scientifically true. You are telling them nonsense. If you are telling our kids that America is more racist and evil than any other country that ever existed, and ignoring what China's doing right now, you are teaching meaningless nonsense to our kids. This is what they're doing. Not all of them. The problem is, even those who resist this can't do it publicly. Yeah. They can't. Because at the level of the principals and the superintendents, certainly your DPI, we had 10 years of Republican control, governor, assembly, Senate, Supreme Court. Nothing got done, did it? Why? Because the DPI was radically lefty that whole time. And the government didn't want to take on the DPI. We begged him to sue him. We begged the government to sue the DPI. They don't have the right to do this. In fact, 2 law firms in Milwaukee, 2 separate ones, did a test case. What would happen if the legislature sued the DPI over who was in control? Both of the law firms said it would be the legislature, not the DPI, but it never moved forward. And so Thomas Sowell's exactly right. Education is being replaced with ideology. Shelby Steele, my favorite historian, he is the preeminent historian, professor on the age of slavery. He's a world-renowned expert. Listen to what Shelby Steele said on this recent interview at Fox News.
We are as free as you can possibly be free. We have enjoyed freedom now for some 50 or so years. Our problem has been a lack of development. This is not a systemically racist society. It is a systemically goodwill toward black people society. The people in this country are rooting for us. They're not holding us back. They want us to do well.
He's exactly right. How come you never hear these black voices? How come you never hear these in the mainstream media? How come we never hear the professors like Shelby Steele who understand the history of this country? He grew up in the South during segregation. Even then, he was able to go to school, go to college, made himself into a professor. His story belies Thomas Sowell's. It belies the lie of this country being systemically racist. And so what Steele is telling you, $20 trillion have been handed over from the haves to the have-nots, many of them minorities, since the Great Society in 1965. We have affirmative action programs. We have all sorts of Head Start programs for non-white kids. What are you talking about? And it's the progressive left, as I said, who's been in charge of schools completely since 1946. Everything the progressive left has done with complete control of the schools across this country is to drive minority achievement lower. Oh yeah, Common Core saw to that. They dragged down all the other kids too. See, that was what the Common Core, if you remember this, but Common Core by definition was lowest common denominator education, right? The purpose of Common Core was never to make your kids smarter, better readers, better mathematicians. The purpose of Common Core was to bring equity to the public schools. That means we have a lot of inner city kids, including a lot of inner city white kids, who were not doing very well at all. So rather than trying to raise them, which we've been trying to do ever since the first kid showed up in school, Adam's child went to the first school, right? There are some kids who work at it, some kids can do it, some kids care, others don't. So we figured this out, the progressive left. You're not going to be able to raise every failing kid. But you know what you can do? Much easier. Hold down the high-achieving kids. That's the common in Common Core, as in lowest common denominator. Fast forward 15 years, you got critical race theory. That is equity applied to education. And the argument is, education is racist. The reason minority kids don't do well is because the system is white and European and white supremacist. So now, we're telling these kids not even to try because the system's stacked against you. Meanwhile, those kids, including minority kids who can actually do it, are being artificially held back because they're going to make the other kids traumatized if you let them move forward. In other words, what the progressive left is giving you is uneducation. What they're doing isn't education. It's not about achievement. It's not about learning. It's not about meritocracy and mastering of subject anymore. All of those things are white supremacy. Equity is all that matters. And if you have to make every kid dumb because you can't get every kid to be smart, that's what they've opted for. And that's what Shelby Steele's telling you. We have not done, this country, ever 50, 60 years, since civil rights, we have been as free as we can be. Not only do we have opportunities, in many cases we have opportunities that white kids don't have. Do we have historically white colleges anymore? No, we have historically black colleges. Doesn't bother me, but there are opportunities for minority kids. Do we have all women's colleges? Yeah. Do we have all men's colleges anymore? No. If anything, we treat minorities in some cases better than other people. Shelby Steele makes a great point there. Listen to this man, this young man in North Carolina. His school board was deciding 9 white liberal women, isn't it always? 9 liberal white women on the school board were just on the verge of voting critical race theory into the school district. He got up and gave a speech and they were forced to not vote that way. Listen to what he says.
I'm biracial, I'm bilingual, I'm multicultural. The fact is, in America, in North Carolina, I can do anything I want, and I teach that to my children. And the person who tells my little pecan-colored kids that they're somehow oppressed based on the color of their skin would be absolutely wrong and absolutely at war with me. And I think that's the same for every parent. What the mask showed us is that the parents, the most powerful group of people in our country, that they're taking back the wheel. Now, obviously, we had to take the wheel back for the mask, but we're taking the wheel back from Washington all the way to Raleigh and into our local school board. Because CRT, all of that, the parents don't want it. It's a big fat lie. There's not one billion. If you believe in CRT, I want to tell you you're a liar. Because that means you look at your black neighbor and say that they're oppressed, and you look at your white neighbor and say that they're evil, regardless of the experience that you've had with them. And we're not going to do that. The parents in the United States of America, right here in North Carolina and Cabarrus County, we know that's not true because we believe the lives we live. The fact is, I've been a business owner right here in North Carolina, and I deal with white people, black people, Hispanic people. My children deal with everybody. And the racism is only happening at the government level and on the media. The fact is, you have racists, and there's like, you can't even find them hardly. You just hear the stories about them. But this is what we're dealing with. The parents are taking the wheel. I have an 8-year-old daughter who is absolutely dynamic, who can do anything. Athletically, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally, she is a dynamo. And I don't want a man swimming against her in the pool. The fact is, I don't want her playing against boys in soccer. I don't even let my sons rough her up. Do you think I'm going to let your son rough her up? This is what we're talking about. Policy going back to the parents. Because if you think people who love America are willing to fight for it, you haven't met parents yet. Because I'm telling you, parents will go further down any street than anyone who loves their country alone.
And then you moved here. So exactly, where do we hear these voices? The reasons critical race theory is winning is because, with all due respect, we're afraid to fight back. It is our Achilles heel, right? How many times have you been told, if you're white, just shut up. Your term is just sit there. And everybody's terrified, including our Republican politicians, are terrified of being called racist. So when they throw that word at you, everybody stops, right? But I'm showing you black voices with great credentials telling you this is nonsense. They figured it out, right? African Americans. Holding down your grandkids is not going to make their kids read. This next one is stunning. This gentleman in Colorado Springs, 11 liberal white people, 8 of them liberal women, had just voted critical race theory into the school board's district. After his speech, they forced another vote and they voted it out again. Listen to this.
I am the direct descendant of the North American slave trade. Both of my parents are black, all 4 of my grandparents are black, all 8 of my great-grandparents, all 16 of my great-greats. On my mother's side, my ancestors were enslaved in Alabama. On my father's side, we were enslaved in Texas. I am not oppressed. I'm not oppressed, and I'm not a victim. I'm neither oppressed nor a victim. I travel all across this country of ours. And I check into hotels, and I fly commercially, and I walk into retail establishments, and I order food in restaurants. I go wherever I want, whenever I want. I am treated with kindness, dignity, and respect, literally from coast to coast. I have 3 children. They are not oppressed either, although they are victims. I've taught my children they are victims of 3 things: their own ignorance, their own laziness, and their own poor decision making. That is all. My children. We are not victims of America. We are not victims of some unseen 190-year-old force that kind of floats around in the ether. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support. And sadly, very sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system. I can think of nothing more damaging to a society than to tell a baby born today that she has grievances against another baby born today simply because of what their ancestors may have done 2 centuries ago. There is simply no point in doing that to our children. And putting critical race theory into our classrooms in part does that. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is not combating racism, it's fanning the flames of what little embers are left. I encourage you to support this resolution. Let racism die the death it deserves, and let's keep living the life
That is the last guys. This is the lived experience of most minorities in this country. Because you know how I know that? If it wasn't this way, they go back. Why are people, particularly black and brown skinned people, coming to this country all from the world, crossing dangerous deserts, sailing across the straits between Cuba and Florida in bathtubs trying to get here? If when they get here, all they find is that you can't go to a hospital and you can't get a job and you can't send your kids to school and you can't get... If that's true, they would leave. This is what's so maddening about this. It's such a palpable lie. In fact, I'm trying to convince you, and that's enough. I've got a lot more of that, but stop there. If critical race theory isn't really about race, then what's it about? Well, I don't think you're going to be surprised to learn this is socialism. Let me give you an example. The next young woman I'm going to show you grew up in Mao's China. And she says that everything that's been happening in America the last 2 years vis-a-vis education is exactly what the Red Guards did before the communists took over. Burned books, tore down statues, renamed schools, had biased reporting teams in schools, had teachers jettisoning education in the name of ideology. Listen to her warning to the public school system.
I'm being very alarmed about what's going on in our school. You are now training our children to be social justice warriors, to loathe our country and our history. Growing up in Mao's China, all this seems very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist, old statues, books, and anything else. We are also encouraged to report on each other, just like the Student Equity Ambassador Program and the bias reporting system. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
What CRT is pure Marxism. It's warmed over Marxist dialectic. What they do is they pit countries against themselves. They foment rifts in society to get people so angry at each other that people are willing to overthrow everything. Think about this for a second. China, the left doesn't want to talk about this. They idolize the Chinese. But China is one of the least diverse countries in the history of the world, right? Unless you're Nancy Pelosi, building a wall is horrible, right? We've been taught that by the left. Well, didn't the Chinese build the largest wall in history to keep people out who look differently? But that's one of the wonders of the world you got to go see, right? So in China, you could not use race to create anarchy because they were all the same race. In China, they used class. In this country, the rift is racial, right? And they're banking on the fact that most white people won't dare stand up to them. That's why I'm showing you all these minority voices who are doing it for us. If you push now the same way, you could overturn a lot of this. If you don't, your own children and grandkids will hate their country. Why is it that not since the 1960s have we had college kids burning and looting in the name of revolution? We went 50 years without it. Antifa is almost exclusively college kids. Because for this generation of college kids, when they started kindergarten, they were taught to hate their country. If you got the education your kids and grandkids are getting, you would hate this country too. If you were taught to believe that slavery is uniquely and exclusionarily a Western problem. My kids believe this. 90% of my students over the last 12 years, I surveyed them. One of the questions I asked them on my survey, name one slaveholding country in the history of the world. 9 out of 10 can't name another one. If you grew up believing that only Americans had slaves and no one else in the world ever did, you'd hate the country too. This is the danger of how we're educating your children. They don't know. When you went to school, I would wager, you probably got moved a little bit left, even in the public schools. But you already had a basic understanding of the country. You were patriotic. You didn't hate the country. So when you got to college, you could have resisted a little bit. But what's going on to this generation of kids? They're never learning anything about this country, except it's evil. Meanwhile, multiculturalism, which we've had since the 1970s, think about what that was. That was critical race, Howard Zinn, communist version of the People's History, right? The best-selling textbook in American history, written by a communist who viewed American history since 1972 through the lens of Marxism. Multiculturalism was the argument that as Western white people, we are not allowed to criticize non-Western cultures. That's racism. We're not allowed to point out 1 million Uyghur Muslims in concentration camps. Can't talk about that. We can't talk about the fact that there's an actual slave trade between Somalia and the Middle East. Black Africans being indentured and sent to Middle East places to serve. Can't talk about that because we're white. But when it comes to your own country, you must only criticize it. You are not allowed to praise it because that's white supremacy. So, critical race theory is not new. You want to go all the way back to 1849? Take a look at the Communist Manifesto. This is how you do it. And here's what here's what you get. What happens to little kids? When kids too young to think abstractly. You know why 5 and 6 and 7-year-olds believe in Santa Claus? Because you told them he exists. If you told them that Winston Churchill was the tooth fairy, they'd start knocking their teeth out and speaking British. That's how little kids are. When you tell little kids that being white is evil, they believe you. How about this book? It's in 46 different middle school libraries and elementary school libraries that I've counted so far in this state. It's meant for kindergarten kids. And its premise is that being white is demonic. Listen. Sorry, here we go.
Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. All right, here's a contract binding you to whiteness. You get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors, and there's a little footnote that says land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. Whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit. The only price is your soul. Sign below. Dude, we can see your pointy tail. Yeah, who do you think is trying to make this deal? Not an angel.
Notice that the devil has a tail, orange hair, and wears a business suit. What do you think that is? What do you think your 5-year-old children, that's the audience, 5 and 6-year-olds, what do you think your children and grandkids at that age are going to hear when they hear this stuff? You are shaming white kids to hate themselves. That's what you're doing. And you're making all non-white kids feel artificially superior and bullied at the same time just by the presence of those kids in your schools. How about this? 5-year-old children. Pre-primary students, they're 4-year-olds actually. You understand that you could have written killed Jews on those placards and they would have marched saying it if you asked them to? They would have said anything you wanted to. That level of politicization is shocking. This is, I don't want to overuse this card, but it is absolutely true that that's how the Nazis indoctrinated children, and the Hitler Jugend, right? It's how the Soviets did it. You politicize them from the moment they're taken from their parents. And then you get this. A group of 5-year-olds, 5th graders, elementary school kids, 5th graders, tormenting 3rd graders, forcing them to their knees to say Black Lives Matter. And if they don't, they get punched in the head. 5 5th graders doing this to 3rd graders.
According to a Springfield police report, during recess on February 10th, a group of black students forced a group of white students to say Black Lives Matter. The report says the white students who avoided the situation were chased, dragged, or carried back to the spot on the playground. One student reportedly was punched in the head. Springfield police were called the following Monday and say they are pursuing charges against the students involved.
In my mind, what this incident should provide is a teachable opportunity for discussions among the Kenwood and Springfield communities about respect for your classmates, students, and all community members each and every day.
NAACP Springfield Unit President Denise Williams says she wants more information about what led up to the incident on the playground.
I need to know what really is the problem. And I want to make sure that the children involved rights are protected.
So the NAACP says, what did those white 3rd graders do to deserve it? And Mr. School Board member says, this is an opportunity to talk. I got news for you, school board dude. All the talking you've been doing to our kids, racializing their classrooms, scapegoating them. Enough talk! Get this garbage out of the schools. That's what you're going to do. This is an opportunity to talk. How much do you want to bet? The program that guy's pushing is more racial sensitivity, more CRT, more victimization. It's outrageous. 5 5th graders thuggishly dragging kids across the playground, 3rd graders, and making them on their knees say Black Lives Matter. And this is the response? How'd this happen? Why did those kids behave that way? Obviously it has to be, right, some form of racism. Absolutely ridiculous for kids that young. Math. Let me prove to you once and for all that critical race theory has nothing to do with race. Because if what you wanted to do was teach kids a subject that was almost guaranteed not to be racist, wouldn't it be math? I mean, how do you screw up math? Numbers don't have colors, right? In fact, maybe it's the one issue you could teach kids that would separate stupidity from anything else. One of my favorite quotes was from a medieval philosopher. He said, if God was only allowed to speak one language, it would be math, because you could not misunderstand it. Well, the proof is in the pudding. Notice how the critical race teachers are teaching math. In early 2021, the entire Oregon Department of Education, there are 18 states right now, 18 states plus this one, Washington State, that are using this math program. It is critical race theory math. Earlier in 2021, the Oregon Department of Education promoted a program for teachers that sought to, quote, dismantle racism in math, arguing that focusing on getting the right answer in math is a symbol of white supremacy. Asking kids to get the right answer is white supremacy. How about this? Along with other equally white supremacist concepts like perfectionism, objectivity, and individualism. Do you see race anywhere in there? I don't see race. Perfectionism, that means that we want to get the answer right. That's a terrible white quality. Wanting to do math correctly, you miserable racist. Meanwhile, objectivity. If objectivity is indeed white supremacy, which they called it, then you can't have science either, could you? Because science means empiricism. Empiricism is a Greek white concept, and therefore we can't ask our kids to do it if they're not white. And finally, they're giving the game away. Who is it that radically prefers collectives over individuals? Who is it that despises the individual in the name of the collective? Wouldn't that be socialism? Notice how in these programs, they never do tell you why math is racist. They don't. But meanwhile, they're going after empiricism, individualism, and right answers. How about this? In this very program, objectivity is described as, quote, the belief that there is such a thing as being objective or neutral. So math isn't, because that's only what white people think. Now do you remember when Common Core made the argument 15 years ago that 2 plus 2 might be 5? You didn't know why, and they never explained it. Now you know. Because 2 plus 2 equals 5 is racist. Because not enough minority kids can keep up with the Asian kids when it comes to getting the answer correct. It's nothing more than that. Objectivity is described as the belief, right? The program also encourages teachers not to focus on a single correct answer in math, but to, quote, come up with at least 2 answers that might solve every problem. You understand that? 2 plus 2 equals 4 is racist because 4 is not better than 5 or 3. Why does 4 get to be the answer? So teachers are literally told, let kids come up with multiple answers for every question. My idiot kid says 2 plus 2 is broccoli. Your kid says it's 2 plus 2 equals 4. They gotta have equal credit for that. Absolutely destructive. It gets even worse. Teachers are asked to use ethnomathematics, mathematics that has been subjected to critical race theory, to identify and challenge the ways that math is used to uphold capitalism, imperialism, and racism. See, note the clever little work there. Racism is exactly the same thing as capitalism. Free markets are racist. Correct math is racist. Science is racist. Everything is racist. So everything's got to go, right? In that same period, July 2021, Oregon's governor, Kate Brown, you'll be pleased to know that she is Jerry Brown Moonbeam's sister. July 2021, Kate Brown signed a bill that actually suspended all proficiency requirements for high school graduates for 5 years. You are not allowed to test outgoing seniors. You can't give assessments to seniors to determine if they can read or not. You're not allowed to do that. Why? Listen to the spokesman. A spokesman for the governor said that suspending all proficiency requirements would help the state's minority students. How? Well, giving them diplomas without having to do anything, right? What do you think about this? Right now in Oregon, you could sign up your kid for freshman year in a public school. You could sign him up to be a freshman in a local public school. 4 years later, even if he never attends a day's class, the state of Oregon will send him a diploma. The diploma is what matters, right? The diploma is what confers intelligence, not knowledge. What better way to equalize stupidity, right? And prior to this law, all you had to do to get your high school diploma was demonstrate that you could read a little sophomore English and do a little bit of sophomore math. That's all you had to do. Gets even better. By that I mean worse. You figured that out, right? In February, the Oregon Department of Education sent a guide to educators, not just math teachers, but to all teachers, claiming that asking students to show their work in math is white supremacy. Educators were warned that marking answers right and wrong is white supremacist. Quote, the concept that math is objective is false, and upholding the idea that there are right and wrong answers in math perpetuates objectivity, which is also white supremacy. Oh, and as an English professor, the guide also claims that respect for the written word is a hallmark of white supremacy. If you think children should not only be able to do math, but should be able to write, you're a bigot. What does any of this, by the way, have to do with math? Anything, or excuse me, with race, anything. Never even mention it. And by the way, there are more poor white kids in this country than poor black kids. More white kids fill our inner city schools than minority kids. They're the ones getting placed past it with this stuff as well. Those kids who don't know how to do it now are getting blamed for being white and creating this system. This, my friends, is evil. You don't believe me yet. This is actual ninth grade algebra test, CRT test, from Arizona. Notice the very first thing on the test is not algebra. It's a short biography of a black activist, Maya Angelou. So here, take a closer look. Here's the math questions. Y equals x plus 2, 3x plus 6y equals 12. If you don't know that, and as an English dude, I don't know. So if you don't know that, that's okay. All you got to do is flip the test over, read the biography, and answer the biography question, which is aligned to the right math question. So in other words, you don't have to do a single math question as long as you simply follow what's in the black activist's bio. So if you don't know the math, I don't know the math, but we do know that Maya Angelou was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend at the age of 8. So if boyfriend, you figure that out, you actually get the right math question. You can see that in the next one too. So again, when I was in 3rd grade, I had a 2nd grade math ability. 52 years later, I still have a 2nd grade math ability. Having said that, when I was in 3rd grade, I was reading at a 12th grade level, and they let me read big people books. Can you imagine if I had to go through Common Core? The one thing that I could do was read, and it would be the one thing they would not let me do. It would destroy reading for me. In the same way, 3rd graders who could do this math, who are forced to sit there and do 2 plus 2 equals 5 garbage, will destroy math for them. That's what they want to do, right? And this is what happens. This is a school in Baltimore, 98% African American kids. It's just staggering. Listen to this.
In reading, 628 Patterson High School students took the test. 484 of them, or 77%, tested at an elementary school reading level. That includes 71 high school students who are reading at a kindergarten level and 88 students reading at a 1st grade level. Another 45 are reading at a 2nd grade level. Just 12 students tested at Patterson High School were reading at grade level. That comes out to less than 2%.
Unbelievable. And you understand, right? If 1/3 of the entire school body, high school school body, if 1/3 of them are reading at a kindergarten or 1st grade level, that means they're not reading at all. Yeah. Kindergarten kids don't read. You've got 1/3 of the class in high school that is not even literate. And you know the most damning thing? Every senior got a diploma. Every single senior got his diploma. Nobody was left behind. Thank you, George Bush, for no child left behind, because he was part of this too. What's the only way you leave no child behind? You promote them, right? What do you think the federal intrusion that was No Child Left Behind? What do you think that was? I hope you're catching on to this real quick. This is as much a Republican problem as a Democrat one. We had all that control of everything when Walker was governor. He wouldn't move. This is the brave man who did Act 10 in his 2nd year and did nothing educational for the next 8. I love him. I'd vote for him again. But he just wasn't interested. And you know, it's hard to get mad at the Democrats. This is what they do. They're proud of this. But it's the Republicans keep telling us, right? Give us your donations, or elect us to office, and you know what? We're going to fix these problems. I'm still waiting for them to do something. It's unbelievable. Speaking of unbelievable, I mentioned critical race. I mentioned social emotional learning. And that is now the umbrella under which this and the sexuality falls. Think about social emotional learning for a second. Where do you hear academics in social emotional learning? Where do you hear it? I can't get over how many school boards with conservative members have thought this was just, that they'll fight critical race theory, but they hear social emotional learning and they think this is all warm and fuzzy. Hey, the DPI is going to give us $120,000 if we implement social emotional learning in our district. Hey, I'm an accountant, I'm a conservative, that's money from the state. Do you understand that when the DPI is giving you anything, It's only to do what they want you to do. It's stunning when you stop and think about it, isn't it? So the question is this: social emotional learning. Where do you hear in that phrase academics? And do you trust an elementary school teacher with a 4-year degree from an education department at UW-Madison? Do you trust that teacher who can't and won't teach your kids to read and write or do math? Do you really trust her with your kid's sociological development? What degree does she have? What qualifications? And even worse, those same teachers are equipped to be psychiatrists for your children, recommending medicine and treatment protocols and Adderall? Are you kidding me? But that's what it means. Social emotional learning is surrendering school to make teachers the parents, not you. To develop them sexually, politically, ideologically, not to teach them how to be self-sufficient or critical thinkers. Watch this video from the United Nations about social emotional learning. You will see exactly what I'm talking about. Watch the symbolism. Let me tell you a couple, it goes fast. Let me give you a couple hints. It starts with a young girl who gets a C- on her math test. Rather than trying harder, she folds it up into an airplane and throws it away. That airplane then lays out for the UN what social emotional learning is all about. Look at the symbolism here. UNESCO. What is education for the 21st century? There's that C-. Throw it away, can't teach you anything. And what are we really about? Gandhi neurons. It's about not math, it's about empathy. It's about compassion. It's not about books. It's about fun. Notice, blind faith upside down. And what is the end game? You guessed it. Global socialism. There's your globalism, right? Where did you see in that propaganda piece for the UN, where did you see anything about school? And do you know what Gandhi neurons are? Gandhi neurons, supposedly this quack doctor has decided that there are little tingly nerves at the front of the brain that he thinks are responsible for empathy. And so he gave them the name Gandhi neurons. However, you do know that Gandhi didn't have much sympathy, right? He wrote an open letter to the Jews during World War II, telling them to surrender to their fate. It would be better for the world if they did. Anyway, Gandhi neurons. Seriously. Quackery, right? Throw away the bad grade. And you saw it, right? At the bottom of the stack of books was blind faith upside down. They're telling you exactly what they're doing. And here's the thing. They're not even trying to hide it from you. They're just not. UN report from 1 month ago. A UN report calls for the decriminalization of all kinds of sex, including pedophilia. A United Nations report written by the International Committee of Jurists and the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights calls for offenses related to sex, drug use, HIV, sexual and reproductive health, homelessness, and poverty to be decriminalized. Experts say that criminalizing these issues is an attack on human rights. The report also decriminalizes pedophilia if the minor says it's okay. Moreover, quote, sexual conduct involving persons below the minimum age of consent to sex may be consensual in fact, if not in law. In this context, the enforcement of criminal law should reflect the rights of persons under the age of 18 to make decisions about consensual sex. So if the law in your country, this is for the whole world, says that you can't have sex, you can't consent to sex until you're such an age, the law should be subordinate to the rights of children to choose to have sex? Well, it makes sense. If you're teaching 7 and 8-year-olds about anal intercourse and 9 and 10-year-olds, you're teaching them all these radical sex acts and how to do them, how to perform them, how can you teach kids that young this kind of vulgar sexuality and then turn around and tell those same kids, oh, but you're 8, you gotta wait 10 years. Understand this. There's no reason to teach your kids the kind of sex we're teaching them unless you are giving them permission. It'd be like giving the keys to your car to your 8-year-old and letting him sleep in the back of the car and telling him, now you just don't drive it. It's not gonna work. There's no other reason for it. And you watch some of these teachers. One of the reasons, you remember with Common Core, and we'll try to wrap this up soon enough, but you think about Common Core. I remember right before Common Core when the public schools were begging us, remember? Please help us. Get your kid a warm breakfast, make sure he's dressed, make him go to sleep, help us make your kids do their homework. Then came Common Core, and what we were immediately told, you know what? You're not smart enough to help your kids, so stay away. Let us do it. You don't know what you're doing. Now with critical race theory, you are not allowed in our schools. We've got the FBI, thanks to Joe Biden, doxing moms and dads, protesting the curriculum. Try to walk into a public school. They're public schools. I get it. There's been shooters. I get that. But you're the taxpayers. You are not even, if you want to go in to check the middle school libraries in a lot of school districts, they won't even let you on campus. Why? Because you know what they're doing, right? In the space of 12 years, you went from them begging you to help to now telling you, not only are you not welcome here, we will decide what happens to your kids, not you. We're not going to let you opt out of our sex and transgender stuff. We're not going to tell you if your kid decides to transition when she's 7. We'll call her the name she wants. We're not going to tell you. Washington State just passed a law that 12-year-olds who don't like the way their parents are dealing with their gender issues, they're allowed to run away. The state will take them in, and the state doesn't even have to tell you by law where your kid is. Your kid is 12, disappears one day, you never see him again. If he ends up at the state, where the state will give him whatever gender ideology he wants. If he wants puberty blockers, it's paid for. And they're not legally allowed to tell you where your kid is. So your kid vanishes, and the state has it for gender reasons. It's illegal for people to tell you where your kid is. Think about that for a second. At age 12. Another reason they don't want you in the schools is because the classrooms have become completely politicized. When I learned how to teach at Purdue University 30 years ago when I was a graduate student, first thing I learned was you never politicize your classroom. Because you're going to be bullying somebody. A classroom is a place of learning. You do not make it a shrine to your politics. I promise you, if you were in these public school classrooms, you would be stunned. I've been in thousands of them. To correct Mr. Chris there, I've been in 48 states now. No one wants to, for some reason, wants to invite me to Hawaii or to Alaska. But I've been everywhere else. And I've been in schools all across the place. For every one American flag I see in a public school, there are a dozen LGBTQ flags. That is the flag they fly. Look at this teacher here.
Okay, so during third period, we have announcements and they do the Pledge of Allegiance. I always tell my class, stand if you feel like it, don't stand if you feel like it, say the words if you want, don't have to say the words. So my class decided to stand but not say the words. Totally fine. Except for the fact that my room does not have a flag. It used to be there. But I took it down during COVID because it made me uncomfortable. And I packed it away and I don't know where, and I haven't found it yet. But my kid today goes, hey, it's kind of weird that we just stand and then, we say it to nothing. And I'm like, oh, well, I gotta find it. Like, I'm working on it. I got you. In the meantime, I tell this kid, we do have a flag in the class that you can pledge your allegiance to. And he looks around and he goes, oh, that one?
So she took down the American flag because it offended her.
Yeah.
And that's the one she told the kid to salute. We're just about done. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for this. This actually makes me feel a little better. You think about the sex stuff. If you want to have me come back, Chris, if it's something that you guys want to see some of that, I'll come and do it. I'm happy to talk about the sex stuff with you, though, but it is pretty graphic. One more video, and we'll take a break, and because it's already 7:40. I want to get you out of here at a timely time. One short video, then we can talk about any of this, or I could give you an overview of what's going on with the sexuality stuff. Unless you really start screaming at me that you want to see things. Watch this.
Happy Pride, everyone! It's June 1st, the start of Pride Month. Here's what I got going in my classroom. I got these flags from Target in like the dollar bin, so that's amazing. They didn't have all of them in the collection that they came out with, so I got all the ones that they had. As well as the inclusive pride flag. I pledge allegiance to the queers.
I must do just a very short one. You would think that something like music would be a no-brainer. Middle school music teacher teaching her kids music.
Here's your ostinato. Terrorist, purple, for parents are. Terrorist, purple, for parents are. While some had good intentions, they all were misinformed. Now threatening violence, stops and teachers has become the norm. They come to school board meetings with lots of things to say, and they will bully, cuss, or scream if they don't get their way.
I lied to you. I apologize. I got to show you one more thing. Because this is where I was going to end right before the sex stuff anyway. And it's right here. Let me get to where it's okay. Now, this guy, this is the last set of the videos. This guy his company gets paid $500,000 to go to school districts to teach teachers what high school in the future is going to look like. He's been paid by multiple districts in this state. You hear it from their own voices. He's going to tell you what... Wisconsin. All across the country. But he's been here, too, in various... he's been in at least three districts that I know of, but all across the country. The group is called... What's the name of it? Equity Collaborative is what it's called. $500,000 of taxpayer money to come and do a seminar. This is the last thing I'm going to show you. Listen to what he tells you education is about moving forward.
And the thing that I think we offer, because I certainly don't think we offer learning per se. I think what we offer are relationship. I think what we offer better, because the learning part, in terms of information, what historically high schools were for, was dissemination of information very quickly. It organized information to disseminate it. Well, actually the internet's better than the high school is. It's faster, it's got first person, you can do interviews, you got video. You're like, truthfully, the teacher in relation to dissemination of information is obsolete. But the teacher in relationship to relationship is the thing.
Is that not the creepiest thing you've seen?
He is nuts.
What he's telling you is, if you want to educate your kid in high school, send them to the internet. We don't do it here. We do social emotional learning. It's all about relationships. We cozy up to your kids. We enable them to be whatever they think they are. We put suggestions in their head. We become their best friends and their surrogate parents. Our job is to use relationships to turn your kids into the monsters we want them to be. And the last slide, listen to what his final word is this.
Adults, to change adults, sometimes I wonder whether it's even worth it. Sometimes you're like, you know what, forget it. They should just get out of the way. We should get out of the way, let kids, because kids are faster. They'll change much faster. Adults are in the way.
You are in the way of their change. The purpose of school is change. Nothing's changed since 2008 and Obama's hope and change. That's what the schools are all about. So, any aspect of this, I'm willing to take questions. You got a microphone for people? Yep. Is it this one?
And nobody stood up and booed him, huh?
What?
Nobody stood up and
They
booed
paid him. Are you kidding? They paid him and they wanted him to come back.
They're nuts. They should have all walked.
Anybody have any questions?
Anyone have any questions?
Take the microphone to
Yeah. Raise your hand. You got a question for him?
Fair enough.
Come on, I've never seen a group. This has never happened. There you go.
question.
Hold on.
All right, how about school choice? What's going on with that?
The problem with school choice, and I agree that parents should have the right to spend their money any way they want. The problem is, and it's a big problem, if the money goes to the state and the state's giving it back to you, there are always strings. There just are. And so until somebody comes up with a school choice policy that says, hey, I get to buy my kid's education, then you credit it on my taxes, it's not going to work. And unfortunately, already there's our organizations in the state that are trying to do it. We've got Academy of Excellence down in Milwaukee, Randy Melchert's program. And what he's trying to do is set up a program where he gets the money for public school moms and dads from the state and then turns it over to the parents so the parents are protected. He becomes kind of a middleman, right? Already the DPI is putting so many conditions on this, and the same legislature that voted $8,500 per Wisconsin kid, it's there. Any Wisconsin mom and dad wants to pull their kid out of school will get $8,500 from the state. But the same legislature that passed that, by the way, that's about half of what we spend. Those kids only get half, right? But the problem is that the same legislature that gave you that is not stopping the DPI from making it impossible. So for instance, if you want to take part in this, you have to do it by April 20th. Who's thinking about fall school on April 20th? And they won't move it forward. Also, they've set an arbitrary number. If you, husband and wife, make more than, I think it's $59,000, I think it's $60,000, you don't qualify. And none of this is, they just did it. The same legislature that awarded the money will not do anything to stop the way the DPI is handling this.
So the deep state is still the problem.
It's the deep state. So I hate to make the, homeschoolers are smart. You know what homeschoolers never ask for? The homeschool movie. They don't want money. Because they know the minute they get it, then homeschool will never be the same again. Already in Massachusetts, they're trying to pass a law, hasn't quite gotten there yet, that would require the only way you'll be allowed to homeschool if either the husband or the wife has a degree in education for a university. California has twice proposed, hasn't gone through yet. California has twice proposed multiple visits from state agents if you homeschool. Twice a year, they have to come into your house. They're allowed to look in your refrigerator, your garage. They have to ask you if there are any guns. And if they don't like what they see, they can ban you from homeschooling. That's where we're heading with this. Yes, Chris?
There's 4 states now that have passed laws concerning gender, as far as no mixing. Basically, it's an oversimplification, but no mixing of the sexes in areas where undressing occurs or partial undressing, including bathrooms, locker rooms, showers, etc. There's about 10 states, at least, that have passed laws saying no bio males on all girls teams. We've been told here in Wisconsin that it's illegal to have policies like that, you know. But what is are you keeping a finger on the legal pulse on this? How good are we now to pass policies in our districts that say we're going to follow what these few states that have done this?
You know what? This is how they get away with it. Joe Biden took his pen, which was not his prerogative, and inserted a caret in Title IX legislation and added gender, right? Completely illegal. Obama did the same thing. So he took existing Title IX Civil Rights Act and he forced into it gender. It's not legally binding, which is why those states were able to do it. The Department of Education says you have to do it because Joe Biden rewrote a law. He's not a lawmaker, he can't do it, but he did it. And so your cowardly Wisconsin superintendents and Department of Education, they've decided that, hey, that's how we get away with it. It's not us. Don't come after us. Don't sit the assembly of the state of Wisconsin on us. Take it up with the feds. That's the beauty of Common Core. And by beauty, I mean it sucks, right? That's what Common Core did. Common Core was the final pipeline between federal interventionism and local schools. So your DPI is hiding behind the feds. But notice what happened in Florida. Florida passed a law. Guess what? Florida's a sovereign state. they don't have to listen to your made-up Title IX garbage. They don't have to. If somebody's, and do you notice this? In all those states that passed the laws, notice what the federal government didn't do. Not yet. It hasn't sued them. Why? Why do you think that is?
Because they're going to lose.
Because they will lose. So what I say to you, Chris, is do it and dare the DPI to do something and dare the feds to do something. All it takes is a little backpack, and you go call Will Law Firm. There's a bunch of pro bono law firms that will take these cases for you. Sue them. Make them defend their laws.
Yeah.
It's obvious. Yes, but we don't do it, right? And by the way, I do believe the state of Wisconsin can sue them. We can sue the feds for that. Yeah.
I would like to hear what you have to say about the sexual piece.